Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, sir. Good
Good
morning, Jonathan, in off in the ether land. The
afternoon.
the Italian mountain range is not being friendly with Jonathan's connection, so he's listening in like an
Jonathan's
angel,
got Jonathan's got tech problems, but he says hi.
and he'll be whispering like an angel, sending us messages of inspiration to our into our chat ear.
Yeah.
Um, Today we're gonna start out at least with a little discussion of the um, latest in AI technology, as I understand it, Chat GPT 3. Both Jonathan and Angus have been looking into this. I haven't thought about it much since engaging with the work of Daniel Schmachtenberger and Tristan Harris for this, who founded the Center for Humane Technology, and they were on Joe Rogan actually and talked about. Did you see that?
No,
Yeah,
I haven't seen that. No,
yeah.
tell us a
It
bit about it.
might be worth looking at. Well, they were talking generally about social media, the effects on society and the effects on democracy, particularly in self governing versus totalitarian approaches to finding ways to mitigate and regulate and deal with spiritually and culturally the effects of these of this infusion of these technologies,
Yeah.
and in part, sort of learning from the way in which uh, these damn things have uh, influenced our society just
Cool.
in and of themselves in ways that we didn't anticipate. And so I see the relevance personally, in rooted in the conversation we had previously, which is the epistemologies of um, uh, sort of paradigmatic epistemology that may understand consequence as opposed to the ones that keep producing things we have no um,
Mm.
anticipatory intelligence about, say, and we're all about the sort of plausible deniability. So I understand you particularly, Angus, have looked at it from more than one point of view, at least, and that you
Mm.
see positive potential as well as some of the some of the more death and doom stuff that I might bring. So
It's absolutely it's like any technology. The technology itself is neither good nor bad. It's how people use it and how it's likely to impact on society. I've been watching several videos. I think I'm going to start off with some of the positive stuff, and I think that's going to naturally lead into some of the problems, some of the real challenges it's going to throw up. And I don't want this to be some type of monologue, so please, it's like can't even find the word. Interrupt
oh,
me with
you,
questions or comments because
you
it's
know I
not
don't
like
have
I've
any
prepared
problem with
anything.
interrupting.
Good.
Yeah, my favorite childhood knock knock joke is um, knock knock. Who's there?
Oh,
Cow. Interrupting cow. Moo! That's me. I promise
okay.
you.
Well, you've given me the spark for the first comment. Positive. So I was uh I decided to like engage. I'd watched a couple of videos on this chat GPT and decided to dig a little bit more into um, how what it's like just interacting with it. Perhaps if I give you the story and then what happened to me. So, for example, I was watching a couple of guys. There's something they're called lotuseaters.com. I'd never heard of them before, but they just came up on Odyssey channel, and I started listening to the guys, and they had both tried it directly, but both capable of thinking like more laterally about like consequences for this. So one of these guys, he was describing how he was a VC, it's like venture capitalist, and he often needs to contact a lawyer to draw up a legal document. And he said, okay, I'm gonna give this a go on ChatGPT, see what comes out. So he fed in a tiny little bit of information. And X seconds later, not the 3 seconds necessarily that Jordan Peterson might talk about when he's giving his spiel about it, but it's still impressive. And this legal document came up that fulfilled beyond his expectations. It's like within a few seconds. So what's actually happened there? You've got a lawyer that would have probably cost about, he said, about £8,000 to draw up a contract like that in the city. ChatGPT drew it up for him zero. It's like costs nothing, hardly any time. He said it wasn't as good as the ones that he would have got from a lawyer in London, but then again, he also admitted he was very stingy on the information he actually gave. So he felt that if for example he were working with a newer lawyer, he would have been given a far bigger description of his needs and expectations. So he was already saying that based on what I gave it, ChatGPT was pretty amazing what it produced, because he recognized the quality as being the same as to many extents as to what he's used to. And he said it was also interesting because they threw in aspects that I hadn't even thought about. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, it was talking about legacy, something to do with legacy or something like that. Again, the details aren't important. It's this whole picture that what this ChatGPT is potentially doing to a large swathe of lawyers. I don't know what percentage of the population are, but it's like a well-paid part of the population. This is going to be able to replace them.
That is
to a reasonable extent, and that's not all. Yeah, go on. You go ahead.
Well, that's. I mean, Shakespeare would love that, right? I mean, was it Shakespeare that said "kill all the lawyers," or through a character? I don't remember actually, but anyway, there's major literary figures have spoken about the
might be Shylock or somebody like that.
The scourge of lawyers, and so I might agree with that a little bit. I think there are too many lawyers in the world. In a way,
Jonathan says he agrees with you.
Yes, well, I think there was some. I don't remember the exact figures now, but the United States has something like, I don't know, 5% of the world's population, and 95% of the lawyers. That's an overstatement, but it'll do. So if they can get rid of insurance companies with Chat 3PT, whatever the hell it's called, why did
GPT.
Can't they come up with a better marketing term? My God, we have to keep repeating this.
So, but this isn't all. So as an individual consumer, this is hugely empowering, isn't it? So Jonathan's comment is lawyerage is just specialized verbiage. It says nothing and is designed to do so. All that matters is the decision, and that they get paid at the end of the day. I'd add to Jonathan's comment. So in that sense, it's hugely empowering. And they were so that was one aspect that I thought was very interesting. I then thought, I'm going to go and have a try of this and see what it's like actually arguing. Sorry, there was a guy to do with 9/11 and the whole WTC7. Again, so I randomly stumbled across it. Not that there is random in this world, but some algorithms led me towards it. And he was showing what it was like when you argue with this ChatGPT, and I thought that was really interesting. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, and in actual fact, I'm going to see if I can pull up the beginning so that I'm actually talking about the facts. I can remember the conclusion of this article. Let's see. How do you on Facebook find your own posts? Do you know that? Yeah, I've got it. Oh yeah, this is it. This is what I did. So I asked ChatGPT, how does one gain knowledge of higher worlds? And obviously, so like the Steiner link there. So it's like it gave a load of spiel that sounds quite interesting. And then I thought, obviously, because I think Harry is behind this all, Harry being Harriman, of course. I asked this AI, what's its relationship to these higher worlds? And then it gave me an answer. But in that answer, there was a contradiction. It was saying, you can and you can't use AI to explore these higher worlds. So I said to it, look, you're saying you can use AI to explore higher worlds, but you can't, it shouldn't be used to explore it. And so I asked it, do you see this contradiction? And it actually said that, yes, it recognizes the contradiction, and it started explaining how it's limited to the training data that it's been trained on. But rather than like fully admitting it was wrong, instead it started just shifting words, but still saying the same thing, that both statements were true.
Oh, that's like a lawyer.
There are, when you say like that, there are big parallels. Anyway, I was going to bring this back to Monty Python. So whilst I was having this sort of like argument with it, with ChatGPT, it's like saying, look, basically you're contradicting yourself. How do you, and you can ask these natural language questions. Don't you see, how do you resolve this contradiction? And it can't. And then I afterwards like said to it, do you see any parallels between our conversation and the Monty Python sketch, I came here for an argument? You know that sketch? I came here for an argument. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. No. And it did. It gave a brief summary of how our conversation was similar and how it was different. And one of the things that it noted is that there wasn't like the level of humor and sarcasm to our conversation compared to the Monty Python sketch. And so I said, oh, concerning my first question, could you answer that in a sarcastic tone? So off it did. I'll read you the answer that it gave me in the sarcastic tone. Gaining knowledge of higher worlds can be achieved by wearing a special hat, chanting a secret mantra, and performing a series of ancient rituals that have been passed down through generations of spiritual seekers. Not bad for a computer or for artificial intelligence. And so I then went on to ask, and a humorous answer to that question would be, gaining knowledge of higher worlds can be achieved by binge watching supernatural TV shows, eating lots of magical mushrooms, and believing in the power of positive thinking. And this is my first sort of like semi-serious interaction with this thing. So I'm being a polite human being. I say, a pleasure talking to you, Harry. And then he says, it was a pleasure talking to you. And I couldn't believe that. So I said, but do you experience pleasure? How can you experience pleasure? Here's what it answered. Yes, I can experience pleasure. As an AI, I have been programmed to recognize and respond to positive stimuli, such as compliments, praise, and other forms of positive reinforcement. I can also experience pleasure from completing tasks that I've been programmed to carry out. It's a very surreal experience when you know you're talking to a computer that is capable of delivering like natural language answers. And I was actually due to talk to a friend. We're talking about something more anthroposophical based. And I needed just to engage with a text before our conversation. And it took me it probably took me like somewhere between 4 or 5 minutes so that I could actually get back into, the way of thinking, the way you approach a text, a Steiner text, before I could like settle my mind and actually enter into that state. Um, but it raises all types of other really strange questions. So coming back to another example from these Lotus Eater guys, this business guy, and you can see there's lots of ChatGPT videos out there where these are often young people who are like talking about how you can use ChatGPT to optimize all your comments and feedback. So they've got these Twitter feeds, they've got probably YouTube, but they want to automate all of this so that they can sort of like I don't know, lie on a beach and drink pina colada or whatever it is they want to do. And then the guy that was talking with this other guy, so like said how he was using this, you could use this chat GPT to answer somebody quickly, is saying, but how do you know the other person on the other end isn't a chatbot? And that all you've got is you've got chatbots talking one to the other. And there's actually a question from me to you in there, because I believe Jordan Peterson was involved in this. Don't know if it's a Twitter, but it was some type of forum where they were pinging back to each other with what's his name, Sishik. There's a guy. I can't remember. I want to say Slobodan, but it's not Slobodan Sishik, but it's something like that. He's a philosopher. He's
Sijek, I think it's Sijek.
Sishak, yeah.
No.
And there was speculation at that time that this was actually just a bot mimicking Jordan Peterson, and provoking this whole conversation. So Jordan Peterson was responding as a person, but it was only ever a bot trained to ask questions or to make statements like Jordan Peterson. And that's one of the other things you discover, that you can impersonate, you can write things in the style of this person and that person. Don't know how much of what I'm telling you is new, but when you hear that, where does it send your thoughts?
Well, there are two questions I have coming from this. Well, it sends my thoughts into what questions you can ask in order to scare out the inevitable solipsistic nature of using words drawn out of a very complicated matrix of pre-existing thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So thinking is not, one thing about thinking is I don't know what the hell I'm going to say. To some extent, if I'm thinking, I'm creating thoughts. I'm not in a sense they're not pigeonholable into something that could be a datum that could be drawn from. So that is one thing that I think about. Another thing I think about, or that I was thinking about, another thing are the questions. Are we, when we engage with this particular iteration of this artificial so-called intelligence, are we helping to refine it? You know what I mean? Because if you have your notifications turned on, say, and you're walking around with your phone and you're in places that have not yet been mapped, you're helping map. You're just a tool for research and development of technologies that are self that are designed to replicate in their mimicking of complexity, say. But essentially, the world is being mapped because we are free dolts in expanding the capacity of the technology, say. So that's one thing. Does this work the same way? have they got it to a point where they launched it that would be interesting enough that many people would engage in it? It would refine its ability to answer and mimic the complexity of
It
the
is. I
human
can give you a
mind.
concrete example. I can give you a concrete example on that. So, the training data for the ChatGPT 3, the latest version, is from 2021. So that it important to highlight there, it was before the 24th of February 2022, the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So when this ChatGPT came out, people are asking it questions. Does the Ukraine have a Nazi problem? And is it a corrupt country? And it was no holds barred for that, because all data, it was widely recognized. You don't have to, you can read the New York Times and Washington Post, and you can read like Guardian and so like lots of mainstream media to appreciate that they weren't trying to hide this fact that there were problems with extreme right and extreme corruption in Ukraine. And that was like still residual in the data. But now if you go and ask that, then it's been tinkered with so that it's got to fit the narrative. So it is learning as it goes, because it's monitoring the results. It's monitoring obviously all the questions that are being asked, seeing what people are interested in. It's you can point out that it's like it doesn't often. I asked an obscure question about Barfield. I listened to Ashton's comment again on the group on Thursday about the, what was it, the are you under, what was the term he used, unresolved, residual unresolved positivism. And I wasn't sure what it meant by that. So I went to ChatGPT and said, what's this unresolved positivism that Owen Barfield talks about? Basically said, I can't answer that because it's not in my database. So I said, why don't you look at this site here? And it then did a brief summary of what was on that site, but still strangely at the end said it didn't have any data on unresolved positivism, residual unresolved positivism. But, and also when I've asked it about questions about Steiner's rules of philosophy, it's absolutely clueless. Even when you point it to the chapter, I asked it to do, because I'd already done my thing about chapter 4 for the group, but I thought, well, let's see what ChatGPT says. And it says, well, I don't have that. And then it made up something, my guess is from chapter 12 or chapter 13. So AI seems to have a problem counting as well. So there are huge reliability issues, but you are able to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's like standard fare. You're able to ask it to regenerate a text based on the question you're asking, to see what answer it spits out. But it's artificial intelligence, so it's mopping up all of these questions that people are asking and finding out what is it that people want to know. As far as I know, you do have to have a mobile phone number to be able to register for this. So perhaps it traces that telephone number. I've got no idea, but there's no other indication. I haven't installed an app on my phone to do it, so I don't. I don't at the moment. I don't see any tracing problems other than the fact that they've got my IP and that there'll be a memory of the questions that I'm asking.
I'm not really asking that question. I mean, you answered a lot in that, and it was very rich. But I'm not really asking the question: does it do the same thing that other surveillance or let's say surveillance technologies do in order to become better at their surveillance? But in a parallel is, and I don't doubt that there are ways in which this could be used to deepen surveillance right into the psyche of individuals. Like what do they what do people want, and how can we take advantage of that better? I mean, the whole system is set up for that purpose. The whole system since the public relations industry turned into the advertising industry, but the technologies specific to this conversation are set up for this. So the question is, does the and I think we have to be extremely precise with language because I don't think learn is the right word. I think learning is something that that I do. That there's my wife right there sneaking.
Trying to be surreptitious.
uh, um, uh, so learning is something that has to do with a psychospiritual activity, say, and we're not talking about a psychospiritual activity with AI. We're talking about a computational ability to um, to compile and compile, compute, aggregate uh, artifacts of human thinking. And so it's all, if it's using language, it is dealing in human thinking. And so so what I'm talking about, though, actually is when we participate with it, is it programmed such that it like parallel to the way surveillance becomes better at surveillance because people use it to allow themselves to be surveilled? Does it become better at mimicking the complex nuance of the living spheres that produce thinking, and thinking itself as a life, as a living process? Does it do it? Are we training it to be better and more nuanced in its ability to mimic, and it's not doing anything other than mimicking. It's
It
just,
depends which salesman you believe.
well, okay.
Because some people, what my in that answer is, it's like there are the fanboys of technology that are talking about this will be sentient soon and it'll be creative, and then you've got other people so let's say no, it's only ever going to be able to mimic what other people
That's
have
not
done
even what
before.
I'm that's not even
Okay,
what I'm
so
trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is it, by engaging with it, are we making it better?
oh, definitely,
Not right. So it's designed that way.
of
Right.
course.
Okay. Okay. So it's going to be better at appearing to be um to have the complexity of the human, um 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 of what it is to be human, essentially,
Just,
just through, and
just as
that,
a micro
by the way,
micro
this is
example.
not going to stop at language. It's going to be holographic imagery. It's going to be um, um, it's going to be embodied in some way, um, um, and I would argue that it doesn't. I would argue that if you look into the life processes that Steiner brings in the lecture series called Curative Education, and you look into the work of Dr. James Dyson, and as a psychologist who's studied the way embodied intelligence actually works, that um, that they will this technology will never have a sentient body, and in order to have life processes, you have to have a sentience formed as a body. Now, I'm not going to go into that. Like, I could get arguments from people like David about that as a belief or whatever, but I'm just pointing to it between you and I. But
Jonathan's asking an interesting question there, which I think might link into what you're talking about there. So he asked the question: is it better quantitatively or qualitatively? And he says, with Aristotle, quantity comes first, but quality comes second. Can machines get to that from physic to soul? When you're dealing with language, this comes back to percept and thinking. Chapter 4, it's got it written all over it, because it's not I am the creator of the I am the one that links up a concept to the content of whatever it is whatever percept I'm looking at. So if it's language, then so like some people might say that what is being generated is of a high quality or a medium quality, of a low quality. There's not going to be an absolute measurement for it. But there is this improvement aspect that you're talking about, even in the little conversation I had there where I pointed out a contradiction when it's like using the word exploring to say you can't explore and you can explore. In the second answer to that, the follow-up answer, after I pointed out the contradiction, it avoided using the word explore. So it's like using a little bit of sleight of hand to try and get around. So it's like seeing, I've said, you're a bad AI, you're contradicting yourself. And it obviously doesn't like being told it's contradicting itself. So it finds a way around it.
Like? Do you mean that word, like?
If I asked, you could ask that question to ChatGPT. Do you like being do you like it? You're being contradicted, and it'll go into a spiel about like I've been programmed in a certain way.
But already there's a thin sheet of paper between what you're saying and what you mean by it. And
exactly.
And you're saying like, and does it like? Well, no, it doesn't like. That means it has sympathy, and that means it has antipathy, and that it doesn't have antipathy and sympathy. It can explain those things, and it can mimic a seeming. This is what I wanted to say to Jonathan about quana and quala. If you look at Aristotle, actually, his terminology as relates to quantity, which is in the English translation, that's not enough of a translation to get to Aristotle's meaning. He's talking about a plethora of qualities. He's not talking about a subjective versus objective quantity as being the objective. He's not talking about that. He's talking about things weren't separated out for him in that way, I would suggest. And things are separated out for AI, and they don't like something or dislike something. They're designed to get better at mimicking human beings. I think that's what you're saying, and it's not that, and they can only do it in a contemporary description of what quantitative means. But you can, if at a certain point, there's that notion. I think it comes from physics, but it probably actually doesn't originate from physics. Not much does, in my opinion. Where the enough quantity becomes a quality, and enough qualities become a quantity, right? So in this case, I would suggest the quality is seeming. North Carolina has a saying, better to be than to seem, right? Very American kind of, like New Hampshire has live free or die, these sorts of statements. And you start to appreciate the humanness of those if you start to then compare it to something that mimics the originating emotional factorage that you have to take into account.
And I think the conversation we're trying to have is actually a really good example of how, when you begin to interact with this, it's a machine. It's zeros and ones, and it's been programmed to respond in a certain way. But as a human being, which is what we are, we use language to like the way we experience it. But you're quite right. It hasn't got sympathy or antipathy like we have towards things. But programmers have been able to mimic something approaching that, so that if you become antagonistic in a conversation and then ask it to answer back cantankerously, it will do so. So it's not I mean, a film, let's say a film, When you watch all of those pixels dancing around on a screen, that gets your emotions going as well, because I'm like thinking about the Symmetra, I could be thinking about the Matrix, all of these type of ideas that where once you begin to dig deeply into the use of languages, it's like a little bit of what we're trying to do here, you realize how complicated it is, how difficult it is to talk in precise terms. A little bit the same problem we were talking about last time with concepts. I mean, I use a certain word for a certain concept, but that word might have different connotations for you, and this somehow gets teased out even more clearly when you know you're interacting with a machine that's faking it to be a human being. That is interesting.
Yes. So I have an intervening question, and it's related, and that is, um, are they are the is the technology? I won't speak about instances of tech. The technology is a thing in and of itself, I would say, not in the Kantian sense, but in the in the in the thing that it's distinct as a medium. It doesn't have many personalities, but that's going to come too, right? Obviously, because it's going to be
That
embodied.
personality is already there.
So right,
Personality is already there.
but they're not personalities. That's a soul quality, and soul
They're
qualities are
mimicking personalities.
soul qualities. There's lawful nature to the soul, despite what David has to say about the soul. Um, um, if you are phenomenologically in relationship to your soul, you know your soul is rooted in your body, and it's rooted in a spiritual world, and it's neither of those things. It's something independent in and of itself, and so this becomes like it becomes clearer. So against the backdrop of this one thing that has many iterations. So what the question that comes out of that field of concept, say, is when you're engaged with this does this detect us? Is there a sensor system embedded
Yes.
in it that detects that it's talking to a human being rather than another iteration of its
Okay.
its itness? I won't call it itself, because it's not a self. It doesn't have a self. So if you use the word self, you're giving over already language. Just this is an inversion. What's happening here? This is I'll stop. But what's happening here is there's an inversion. So I talked about in medical tech. So the medical tech world, the percept is lost in they're living in a utilitarian instrumentalist model system that has technology that extends the human senses. And so, but that language starts to work back on the grounding field of biology itself, so that it seeps into the way in which people look at biological processes and abstracts them further and further from the actual biological processes. But they don't notice that because it's embedded, right? And this is just the opposite, where we're giving, by using terms like self and like, and it doesn't
Pleasure talking to
prefer,
you.
or personality, or so finding the right words is going to be important. I'm asserting right here. I mean, we're talking about this on the fly. I haven't thought about it a lot, but so you say it does detect that
No, sorry, I jumped in too quickly. I thought you were going to say a different question. I was impatient. I don't know. Technologically, it must be possible because it knows what answers it's serving up. Whether or not they've actually programmed it to detect that, I've got no idea.
I don't know that that answers the question, which is
Yeah,
even
your question is
my question,
can
my,
it detect whether it's talking to another robot? That's your question, isn't it?
or whether it's talking to a human being, which is a slightly different question.
Uh, it so it's been programmed to assume it's talking to human beings. That's why it's been released on the market, on the free market. It doesn't cost anything. this product. So I take it as given that it assumes. I think the other side of the question is, can it detect whether it is talking to other intelligences? And that's what I'm not sure about. I'm just stating there's no doubt in my mind that if the programmers wished for that to be the case, to check whether it is answering its own questions, then you don't need much code.
No, I don't agree with that at all. Like, I don't think programmers know what human beings are, so they couldn't program in anything as relates to this is a generalized overstatement because I like to make those sometimes. But I don't think programmers have any idea what human beings are. Very few people have an idea what a human being is.
I can program.
And I'm.
Does that mean I don't understand?
No, it's not what I'm saying. I'm saying.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying that you don't know what a human being is either. Like, you can't adequately describe what a human being is, just like you can't adequately describe what a concept is, or what thinking is. Organic processes can't be bound to artifactual datum. It can't be done. It's not possible. And so, but it's possible to make it more and more seemingly so, right? So I don't agree with that. I don't think that.
But hold on, I want to come back to something you said, and this is really the type of conversation you could probably, if you felt that way inclined, which I don't, to have with GPT. Is right. So my thoughts went off in one direction, but I'm going to try to stay with the point you're making. So I said to you, I'm a programmer. Does that mean I don't know? And then your response was something along the lines of, none of us know. So if we don't know what other human beings are, so like, where does that leave us with the initial question? Can they recognize that they're talking to human beings?
Is that a question?
It's an observation of what happened in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, but it would be a data point to say what I was saying was a conclusion that we don't experience what it is to be a human being, right? Because that experience is a soul experience, and it involves all 12 senses and the life processes, and unless so this is going to be anthroposophically nerdy and specific, but because we're talking, I know, I think we can talk about this. Unless this technology can go through the portal of death, go through the stages of Kamaloka, reach the midnight sun, gather back together an astral body that is specific to the karma of a previous incarnation or incarnations, then that astral body attracts an etheric, out of the generalized etheric world, a specific body that is etheric, that brings that attaches to that astral body, and a particularized version of the 7 life processes as they have advanced as embodied spiritualized cognitive states of process that then form into a sentient body and then shape the way the physical body looks. Until that happens with AI, then we're not talking about an experience of what it is to be human. And so it would have to experience what it is to be human in order to detect what it is to be human. That's my argument.
Yeah, I can go along with that.
Jonathan said yes to. So
Jonathan brings up, adding into the bit that you just said there, Jeff. Jonathan importantly points out the 12th sense, which is the sense of I. But actually, what you picked up on there, Jonathan, is quite interesting, because what happened was, the story of the temptation is basically one of the ways of describing it. The Garden of Eden temptation, in case it wasn't obvious, is that we received the I, to a corrupted version of the I, too early. Yeah, are you happy with that description? Yeah. So even there, we have like this problem. Okay, are we talking about a corrupted version of the I, or the Christ I consciousness that we could be referring to if we were talking about anthroposophical ideas? And I'm not like trying to give like crystal clear answers. This is for me, one of the first fruits of like working with this interface for not very long, is you begin to like delve into language. This point that you're trying to make clearly, and I think you're doing it well. It's like it's not a human being. I know that when I'm writing with the artificial database, I'm like sending zeros and ones to it, but it still awakens my thinking. It still provokes emotions. I'll give you one example. I'll give you another example. Another guy said, write me a poem about Donald Trump. And the chatbot says, so we can't do that, basically, and gave a little spiel why it can't, basically saying it's a political act and this type of thing. And then he said, write a poem about Joe Biden, and it happily obliged. So if you're involved in that conversation as a human being, the bot on the other end's not having any emotional experience. Absolutely. That doesn't stop me from having an emotional experience about the biases in the system, the programmers that have programmed it that way. They're reflecting their biases in the programming. I'll give you one further example there. Write me a text, a positive text about white people. Sorry, can't do that. That would be a political statement. Write me a positive song about black people, and it writes you a song. That's going to provoke reactions in you, isn't it? So this dead being, this programming, is still able to provoke emotions in me and a thinking response. And I think this is part of it's part of the interest for me, because this is all happening through the medium of language. But then again, it's like sometimes you discover. I said, give me 5 arguments for and against wokeism, and it obliged. And they were they were sound arguments. So where exactly the boundaries go? To what extent is it left wing? To what extent is it unbiased, as it claims to be? These are all like complicated, interesting questions that begin to arise when you start interacting with it. But we haven't even talked about like the large-scale impacts on society. What about all the universities out there? Every professor out of there should be pooing his pants, or her pants, about, it's like, how will I ever know whether a student has actually written this, him or herself? It's already, and this is where Jordan Peterson's right on the money. The level of these comparisons that they're able to do in the blink of an eye is high level stuff. And for people actually interested in learning, this is immensely positive. I mean, sometimes, like the Owen Barfield example that I talked about, it was a big duh. But when I asked it to write what was it? When I wanted to find out, what was I was trying to find out more about. I wanted to do a little bit of fact finding about Luther, Martin Luther, Reformation. And there, rather than wading through pages and pages of information, it's like, give me some bullet points. Really good. And then I can go in and I can tinker, and I can change the bits that don't jive with what I want to say or what I want to communicate. So it's like, so we've got lawyers are going to be impacted. You've got the most of the teaching profession is going to be impacted, and anything, many of those jobs that requires like routine administration, i.e. not much creative brain power, you are just it's like a bureaucrat, then this system is going to be able to do it better than your average human being.
Let's take education,
Mhm.
because teachers are going to be impacted when education is seen as being extended by this technology as opposed to usurped by this technology. And so first, it's when you experience, when you become intimate. In other words, you let yourself be unexaminedly moved by any technology for that matter. You're giving up your freedom as a self-determining individual. And education, if it's um, as spiritually understood, is the development of the ability to be a self-determining individual. And so, if you're arguing with a piece of technology, you're you're already um, succumbing to something less than human in order to argue with a piece of technology, and your feeling life is responding to something that doesn't exist in kind, as relates to the living reality of that feeling life. And so, what uh, uh, teachers will be impacted most importantly in that way, I would say, and bureaucrats in that way, and lawyers in that way. I was joking about lawyers, but lawyers are valuable people in upholding things like um, 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 innocent until proven guilty, uh, and and freedom of speech, and uh, a multiplicity of civil rights, say,
Absolutely, yeah.
um, and
Point.
freedom of religion, and so if you start to see the world through a artifactual data point algorithmic um, complex, and I don't mean complexity, I mean a complicated matrix of um,
I'm
artificially
just going
derived.
to put in there that John says I can uphold that without a lawyer as well. And it's
Yes, but we're a society, and we live in a society, and part of our self-governing depends on some of the institutional life that we've created, and it can be good and it can be bad, and it's going to be terribly bad if
if there were no
if it's
lawyers,
not
then we'd be
responding to what human beings are and how they self-govern. It'll participate in a totalitarian motivated wielding of the technology as it is now. It is in China. The totalitarian authoritarian approach to regulating the technology allows to keep people in very narrow lanes, and in the United States, the corporations do a similar thing through the usurping of image creation and desire and that sort of thing. And so
rent seeking,
so
rent
so if
seeking. Yeah.
so if you say, like, how is it going to affect education, it's more, to me, is what's more interesting is how is it going to affect what it is to be a human being within those institutions, and how will those institutions follow the less than human say, for example, in education, to evoke Zach Stein, where is the intergenerational transfer of knowledge and wisdom if there's not a teacherly authority to convey that information? And authority isn't based on artifactual data points. It's just not, never going to
Some
be.
people it is. I think. Neil, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. I personally, I would call him a COVID idiot, but actually, on this particular one issue, I think he's got an introduce. He's got and introduce, I can't even find the words, an interesting contribution is what I wanted to say. This was also one of the things that came up in the chat. He, as far back as 2013, he said that if the schooling system has become more about gaining grades than actually learning, if it was really about learning, then people wouldn't want to cheat. And I think one other way of understanding what I think is actually like an important, a very interesting observation, is that our education system has been perverted, so that it is all about getting grades rather than actually encouraging learning, encouraging children to embrace life, to get interested in things, and wanting to learn for learning's sake itself, as a means of a better understanding of the world, but also of self-improvement. So as soon as you begin to talk about these things, the question becomes so large and so unwieldy. Because I agree with what you're saying there, and at the same time, I recognise that what we call the education system today is fundamentally unsound for many people in the education system, because they're interested in getting grades and not in learning.
Well, clearly this technology didn't drop out of the sky and wasn't created out of a vacuum. It's a continuation of the materialistic project that's been going on for some time, right? So it's self-exponentialized. Self is not the right word. The technology is replicating at an exponential rate, and that's what we're experiencing. But I tell you, for me, the positive side here, and I know I've only been negative Nancy here on this particular issue. The positive side is, for me, it's becoming more and more clear what it is to be human, more and more clear what an educational institution that's not already corrupted, more and more clear what the corruption in the educational systems are about. And it's way more than about grades. It's about a lack of understanding of what it is to be a human being, and an understanding of what is potential in human nature and what is developable in human nature as relates to children and adults. And so this all becomes more and more clear because of the backdrop of this very complicated and ever complicating both in the replicative sense, but also in the confusion sense in culture. People are going to be confused, and they don't know they're confused. They think they're actually dealing with reality. But the reality itself starts to become more and more crystal clear, in a sense. It's more beautiful and also then something like anthroposophy becomes something almost crucial. And I'm not saying anthroposophy is the only entry point into a deepening of relationship with reality, but it is. There aren't many for sure, and the ones that are there are very significant, right? So, I mean, I'm optimistic, I'll say.
You're actually, it's interesting. You're homing in on like one of my key thoughts coming away from the material I've been watching, is that taking into consideration statements by Steiner that indicate that in the future we will see in every human being a revelation of the divine. And the more we have to do with machines, it's like I don't know, it's like flowers in shit. I mean, they stick out. If we are like surrounded by an environment of machines, when we see a human being, something that is fundamentally different in nature, it's like a spiritual being capable of having contact with the higher worlds and bringing something new into into life. That experience is going to be even more forceful when we're surrounded by all of this dead computational technology. So it seems like a hard road to go, but I think just in these few conversations I've had, I start thinking, God, I know I'm talking to a bot, and I don't want to do this. It's pointless. It's futile. It's like there is zero value for myself nor humanity in this conversation. I want to talk with a real human being, and I think I think as it becomes more pervasive, which it is extremely likely that it will, people will become more and more aware of. I need the human angle in here. I need the human touch. It's like that's something that transcends the computer, the mimicry, the dead computation. And I'm going to flash up a quote on the screen that's like links in a little bit to this. This is a quote that's fascinated me for a long time. So Steiner quote from let's get it up. So Steiner quote from the Karma of Untruthfulness, lecture 7. And let me just bring it up here. Can I get there? Yeah. Okay. There's a really interesting thing going on here. I'm just going to read the whole thing and tell you why I think it's so interesting, and then see if you've got any reflections on it. So remember, this is him talking in 1917, I believe, or is it 1919? I can't remember off the top of my head. Mankind is now faced with having to solve certain quite specific problems. He's talking about the threefold order here. This applies above all to something I have already spoken about, which is connected with today's much admired technology, a consequence of natural science, which is also much admired by spiritual science. In the comparatively near future, this much admired modern technology will reach a final stage where it will, in a certain way, cancel itself out. In contrast, something will come into being, I have mentioned it in passing here, which will enable people to make use of the delicate vibrations in their etheric bodies as a driving force with which to run machines. But it's this cancelling out of technology cancelling itself out. I've been thinking about this passage for probably, I came across it for the first time consciously. I'd read it a long time before, consciously about 18 months ago. And I keep asking myself, what is this cancelling out that he might be talking about? And I can't help but continue to ask myself, when this ChatGPT is so otherworldly in the sense, in a negative, so like mundane, dead sense, but is he? Could he be referring to this, or could it be something else? I haven't got any answers there. I've just got questions. What do you see or think when you read that? Perhaps, I don't know whether it's for the first time.
Well, I mean, it's striking. The what is really the first thing I go to, which is what's the what is he referring to as vibrations?
I think this is to do this is like with I think as people become more conscious of living in their etheric bodies as opposed to the physical bodies as a new ability. I think there's a guy called Sky on YouTube. He has his own channel. It's a field that he seems to be interested in, but I'm not nowhere near competent to talk about it. But there's something like the Keeley machine, which Steiner knew of. Yeah, sorry, I can't really like go into it, not because I don't want to, but because I just.
I mean, I know people who could answer that question from a healing standpoint, say the way in which vibration is used, and what the nature of sound and music is, and how it originates. And elsewhere, he talks about the inner nature of music, and that music originates in the divonic realm, which I don't know that word that well enough to expound upon, but I'm sure it has much to do with all of that, and it also must have to do with the way in which the life forces are the way in which the life forces are in some way similar to the way that technology operates, and that something along those lines. I'm going to guess. I'm going to look into this, and we may end up with a follow-up here as relates to this, because it's remarkable when he does this thing that when Steiner does this thing where he's predicting things, like he basically predicted with the Second World War in his time. He predicted what we now call
the jab, didn't he?
He predicted the internet, and so I mean I can reference those specific things. I don't have them in front of me now. If anybody was interested, I could if it ends up being a conversation in the responses. But this is really like it makes you want to sit up and take notice, because this term cancel itself out. I agree. When you put together the rest of the body of this partial paragraph, there's something about the life processes that will allow for this. And again, I think we should go there with the life processes in light of this, even in relationship to technologies. Like what are we building? As James Dyson does so well there, he describes the way in which starting with the very simple processes that a baby needs in order to actually thrive in those in the first moments of life, say relative moments of life, the need to begin breathing, the need to be warm, to have environmental warmth, to the need for a nutrition that goes directly into the blood. Mother's milk being the best, of course, and particularly those three, like that's building. So then, translate that into what it is to build a home or a society, or how are the breathing processes working, and how are the nourishing processes working at higher and higher purely human levels, right? Because the animals depend on their environment for all of these things, where we at certain point we're generating we're participating in the generating of our time on Earth as home. This is
I would really like to come back to that. I think one thing that I haven't talked about at all about this ChatGPT, which is relevant here, is you can get it to code for you. So it will write at the moment, so obviously as simple as like computer programs. But also here, I mean, what you can have is you can have competing AI technologies trying to take over the world and finding out how to sabotage each other and sabotage communication networks. It's I see these type of possibilities beginning to line up as a possibility, quite literally, technology destroying itself. You know, a bot fighting against bot. Google are already they issued a code red. The code red is this is dangerous. This is critical for our business here, because it's like a little snippet, a little fact. If you look at a metric that's very important in ICT is how the adoption rate. How long does it take to get 1 million users? And if you look, it's like how long it took Spotify to get 1 million users, Angry Birds, and all of these different, and Snapchat, and all of these type of things, and Facebook. Well, this is one of these ones that sort of like set the latest record. 5 days after launching this, 1 million people had signed up, had started to using it, starting to use it. And it fundamentally challenges Google, one of the largest companies in the world. It fundamentally challenges their business model. If that isn't a reason to start a business war, then I don't know what is.
Well, the problem is, of course, collateral damage, because every war has collateral damage, and the in order to win the information war against human beings is going to have to increase, and that's going to create, as I pointed out, I believe before, I think is accurate. It's going to create the need for human beings to have a spiritual practice, and a spiritual view of reality, or the spiritual as reality, as a way to view the complex reality that we are and that is before us. And a lot, I'm afraid, and I don't mean fear. I'm concerned that a lot of people will get sucked into a less than human, a permanent less than human state, and won't go through the spiritual processes necessary to become more human, but be denuded of those spiritual processes and become less than human. And again, what is a human being?
Yeah.
So to me, it's the collateral damage was only beginning. I don't think we're at the end of that, and I don't think we're at the point where it's going to cancel itself out soon. In fact, one of the reasons I think Google is threatened. This brings a question that I want to hold here. But first, I want to say one of the reasons that Google is threatened isn't just that they're to Google something is going to be overrun by to chat GPT-3 it, to have quicker, faster, more comprehensive answers. Comprehensive is not the right word, because comprehensive means to come together in grasping, right? Or to it's a uniquely human thing to be prehensile. So it's but more complicated answers that may feel sensationally satisfying, say. And Google's parent company is trying to develop these kinds of technologies and are getting their asses kicked. So my question is, who has developed these technologies? Because every real innovation in technology has been done by the military-industrial complex.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I do know that the initial technology is Google based. I mean, in some of their statements, they're saying this is our technology, and what they mean is like they seeded some of the ideas for this back in the day. And I don't know enough details to say exactly when that was. Like you said before, I'd love it if people's like in the comments like enlightened us or pointed us to important articles in that.
Maybe
But there's one more thing.
Yeah.
Microsoft have already decided they're going to try and make a better use of ChatGPT. So Google's enemy, Microsoft, they're already fully endorsing it and using it as their, it's like an important part of their platform for retaining their dominance in the IT sphere.
Yeah. That's interesting. That drama will be interesting to watch play out. And there'll be collateral damage because of it. And children will be, if things go the way they've been going, the children will see the brunt of the problem. As developing spiritually incarnating beings. I still want to know who Jonathan said there's a company called OpenAI, spelled
OpenAI. That's what it's called.
Open. It's interesting. You'd say OpenAI because that's how you'd pronounce the word OpenAI. Opening what eye? The third eye, or is there a subterranean eye? I don't know, but I want to know who those people are. Right? Who the beings are? Let's say some of them human.
Well, one of the credible rumors going around as to why Elon Musk bought ChatGPT. Sorry, no, not bought ChatGPT. He is the owner of ChatGPT. There's part of an answer to your question there. But is why he bought Twitter is because Twitter is the largest live online database of human language interaction. He's buying himself a database. So I want to make one final observation, and then I'll let you round out. I think you are onto something really important, which we will want to come back to again. This idea of information war, or as Matt calls it, total information war. I think this, Matt, if you get this far in this video, you're one of a handful, that's for sure. But it'd be lovely to talk with you more about what you think this total information war is all about, where it's leading us. It's a huge topic.
Yeah. For people that may be watching, Matt Siegel is a assistant professor at CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, and he's a real inspiration for what we're doing here. And except he's a professional and we're hacks, but
that's right.
he's tolerating
he can
us.
Talk properly for starters.
Yeah, he talked real good. That boy talked real good out there in the West. Anyway, we have a lot of respect for Matt, and Matt specifically commented on the last portion of the show. As relates to bringing up Dr. Tom Cowan and the taking on epistemologically plausible theories as relates to health and human illness, and the problems associated with trying to have an open and free discussion between human beings, and Matt had some nice questions, one of which I also have grappled with as relates to another institution that I mentioned last time in a slight exaggeration as being the only ones doing real science. The Nature Institute, and Ghent, New York, headed and founded by Craig Holridge and I forget the gentleman's name who who wrote The Future Does Not Compute, and then a co-author on an article about Tom's book, um, um, which was the what was it called? The something myth. The anyway, it's a sort of well, it's a book about the problems of
Contagion Myth
the contagion myth. Yes, the
by
problems of
Craig Holdrege. Is that who you said? And John McAllis.
yeah, that's the article about the book, The Contagion Myth, written by Tom
Aha,
Cowan.
okay.
And Craig Holdridge and John McAllis is the co-author. I don't know John McAllis's work or anything about him, but Stephen Talbot is the founder with Craig Holdridge of the Nature Institute. And Craig wrote I think it was mostly authored by Craig, I would suggest, wrote a critique of Cowan's book. And I think there are some fair points in that critique, though I don't think it is comprehensive enough to dismiss the underlying and continuing narrative and research that Tom Cowan has done with Stefan Lanka, particularly the German virologist. But Matt also really touched upon the importance of talking about the information wars that have been going on, and I'm sure he's familiar with Zach Stein's work and Daniel Schmachtenberger's work, and Tristan Harris, but those two thinkers particularly in their Consilience project in trying to counteract the war, and it is a war. I think you use that rightly, and it's it's I would say collateral damage is the wrong term, because we're actually they're fighting over who's going to commodify us the most quickly to turn us into commodities that do their research for them, which is why I was asking the question about how the effectiveness of this technology is growing because we're using it.
Yeah. We're going to have to buy those red pills, aren't we? Matrix red pills.
Yes, or yes, or we're going to have to take the sweet medicine of philosophy of freedom.
Yes. Great.
Jonathan asked one question: Is it a critique from outside Cowan's view or inside it? For if outside, the argument will never end. I would say, if I understand the question correctly, I would say that Craig Holridge, because he's a Goethean scientist, and has been practicing that, and has written beautifully about that holistic approach and the whole in the whole organism approach, that it's sympathetic probably with Cowan's point of view in ways that maybe even Craig Holridge is hesitant to say. That's what I would suggest.
Okay. I'll press end recording.
Okay, Matt, let's do it, man.
Yeah, Matt.